Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're coming from. Welcome to our session today, titled Financial Inclusion Information Exchange, Understanding SGM Finance Needs. As Mona has already stated, our session will be recorded and it will later be available on YouTube for further accessibility to all other people that will not be available today. And thank you for making time. On our platform today is 4 guest speakers, 4 miners from Kenya, Uganda, Colombia, and Cote d'Ivoire, who've made the time to be here today and share their perspectives on formal and informal financing across their work in artisanal gold mining. Please note that the session will be simultaneously translated, and pick the button at the bottom of the screen. You can pick between either French, English, or Spanish. Thank you for making the time to be here. On the session today is also representatives from planetGOLD implementing countries around the world. We're able to invite participants from both phase 1 countries and phase 2. Phase 1 including Kenya, Burkina Faso, we have Colombia on the line. We invited Peru, Ecuador, Indonesia, the project ended. We have Philippines and Mongolia, who were also invited on the session today. Ecuador is also a planetGOLD implementing country, but they are also continuing for their efforts in phase 2, and they're also on the call today. We have phase 2 countries, including Uganda, we have Cote d'Ivoire, we have Congo, Zambia, and several other countries on the line today. Thank you for making the time to be here. To introduce myself briefly, my name is Candice Mkamburi Jumo. I'm a mining and mineral processing engineer from based in Nairobi, Kenya, but I work across gold, artisanal gold and cobalt in East and Central Africa. At the Impact Facility, we have a lease to purchase equipment provision model, for which we provide access to finance to artisanal gold miners in Western Kenya and now scaling to Tanzania, bridging their gap to formal financing in the absence of banks providing financing to the sector. On the agenda for our call today, we'll start with an introduction to the session where I will provide you with some context as to why we're here today. The miners on the call, at least our guest speakers, will be able to introduce themselves today. And then we will have the miner session where it will be an interactive session where we'll be able to ask the miners questions, some of which we've already prepared today, and some of which, I would like to prompt you to be able to ask any questions, share any lessons you have learned in your work so far. If not, ask any questions with regards to their experience and perspective so far. And then we'll have a summary of the session and a Q&A session, and then we will close the session at the end of it all. Now, the reason we're here today is, as we all know, planetGOLD, the Global planetGOLD program has a mandate. One of the 4 mandates is to facilitate access to formal financing to artisanal and small-scale gold miners across the jurisdiction in which the project operates. And so one of the challenges that we have realized so far is there's limited understanding, at least by banks and microfinancing institutions, of the artisanal and small-scale sector. And that is why planetGOLD countries have the mandate to figure out a way to be able to, push artisanal miners currently outside the margins of formal finance into formal finance through a myriad of activities or interventions. Formal financing, which is banks, microfinance, have a limited understanding of the sector, which you all know. They do not understand the seasonality, at least of the gold sector. They do not understand the supply chain mechanisms. They have no understanding of why production share is preferred in some cases rather than cash payments. They perceive the sector to be too risky. That's another point, especially in jurisdictions where the formalization of the sector by the government has been slow to progress. And so, from a compliance side, engaging with ASM is a risky venture for these banks and microfinance institutions, and so they would rather not. There is also the reputational risk of associating with artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Here, we're talking about the environmental, social, and governance challenges that exist in the sector. In some cases, artisanal mining has been associated with child labor violations, health and safety violations, security, where it has been able to fund money laundering, or a lot of challenges. So the practical, regulatory, and operational challenges of the sector limit the bank's involvement into the sector. So despite this, and this is something that we all know, is that access to finance or access to investment for miners is the key factor for enabling their progression from artisanal, in the case where they're defined as artisanal, and using non-mechanized tool, to small scale, where they're semi-mechanized, they have better production mechanisms, more efficient operations, safer and more dignified operations. And so even when formalization is working out, even when miners are being sensitized on, more efficient processing, like mercury-free equipment, and how to have, safe operations on site without access to the financing that is needed for them to access these technological advancements, not much is going to change. And that is why this is one of the mandates for the planetGOLD implementing countries. At the Impact Facility, together with the Alliance for Responsible Mining, for the last half of this year, we were contracted to document the financial inclusion efforts of planetGOLD Phase 1 countries, the 9 Phase 1 countries. And as a result of this work, we were able to come up with a cross-programmatic analysis document that documented the best practices, the challenges encountered, the best practices, and the lessons learned by each individual country that was able to successfully pilot, and in some cases, not reach the stage of successful pilot implementation. And as you can see on this slide deck, there are several organizations across the world, some of which are planetGOLD implementing countries like Conservation International, the Single Gold Council, several ministries across the world, the Alliance for Responsible Mining, all of which are working towards a similar goal of ASM financial inclusion as part of their broader scope of their work. And so what we learned as we're documenting the SGM financial inclusion efforts of the planetGOLD countries is, if there was intentional conversation and exchanges between some of these implementing countries, then a lot of the lessons learned would have been able to be shared, and some of the countries that were less successful in their work might have been able to take a couple of pointers from their colleagues from around the world and try to implement this. Of course, taking into account the different legal and regulatory restrictions. And so the reason for our call today is that this session, which is one of 3, the rest of which I will a bit more later on, are meant to create an opportunity for planetGOLD countries, but not exclusive to planetGOLD countries. I've also invited several other participants on the call to form a community of practice and encourage regular peer-to-peer exchanges with the goal of catalyzing individual efforts for the successful formal financial inclusion of gold miners across the globe. So the first session will be getting the miners' perspective on their access to formal financing and informal financing, what were the best features of each, and what we can learn from them as we try to design financial products for the different miners in the countries that we operate in. The second session would be we would invite banking institutions to be part of the guest speakers, several of which have been able to provide funding to ASGM and get their perspective on how they were able to make their case internally, among other factors. And the third session would be, a showcase of alternative financing mechanisms. Because most times when we think about formal finance or informal formal finance, we just think about banks and microfinance, but there are other different ways to finance ASGM. In the case of, I think, Peru, Solidaridad has been working with Toll Refiner, a mining and mineral processing company, where they've been able to, purchase ore from the miners instead of, purchase ore from the miners as a mechanism for financial inclusion. We have what we're doing at the Impact Facility, where we're focusing on equipment provision as a bridge to miners' access to banks and microfinance in the future, trying to showcase a track record that mining, at least artisanal and small-scale gold mining in Kenya and Tanzania, is investable. We also have cases where village loans and savings mechanisms have been implemented in countries such as Colombia and Burkina Faso as a means for miners in the more rural areas to be able to access financing for the improvement of their work. And so the goal of these sessions, the next of which will be happening in October, and the final one will be happening in December, is to incentivize, even after the Impact Facility steps our way, how can the teams regularly meet up and share, progress on the ground, best practices, etc. So thank you for making the time to be here today, from wherever you're from. And yeah, now I would like to invite some of our miners who are on the call today to at first introduce themselves. We have miners from, as I said, we have 4 miners on the call. We have Uganda, we have Emmanuel from Uganda, we have Lawrence from Kenya, we have Juan Perez from Colombia, and we also have Mr. Zachary Bamba from Cote d'Ivoire, all willing to share their perspective. And so, Emmanuel, would it be possible for you to start with the introduction, and then we can head over to Lawrence? Just provide a brief introduction of yourself and the work that you have done so far, and how long you have been a miner for, before we dive into the context of the call. Can you hear me, Emmanuel? Maybe unmute yourself. Mona, can you please help me unmute Emmanuel?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Candice. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I'm called Emmanuel Chiburige, and I'm the General Secretary of Movement, the United Miners Assembly, National Coordinator of the Uganda Association of Artisanal, the Small Scale Miners Association. I sit on the multi-stakeholder group of the Uganda Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative as the representative of artisanal miners. I've been mining for the last 13 years, and I have a company called Company Treasure Mineral Dealers Limited, where I do processing of gold ores for artisanal small-scale miners. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Lauren, can you go ahead? And would it also be possible for you to open your video?
Myself?
Yes, and Lawrence too.
I can't tell who's trying to speak, but they all have access to unmute, but they're not. I'm not sure who is
Maybe Lawrence.
Okay, I'm not sure what his name is under the, how he called in. Lawrence, are you able to,
I think it's VS Joe.
are you able to unmute them, Candace? Sorry, I don't see them on here.
Give me 1 second.
Everyone should
He's
be able
dropped
to okay, he's dropped off. Okay.
Yeah, he'll be joining in a second. Maybe we can go on to our next speaker, Mr. Juan Corres, after which we can go to Mr. Bamba Zachary. Can you kindly introduce yourself, Juan?
Oh, ok, muchísimas gracias. Primeramente, gracias por la invitación a planetGOLD. A los demás miembros, un gran saludo. Mi nombre es Juan Jesús Correa Chavestán. Soy el gerente general de la compañía minera Correa Chavestán. Es una empresa familiar constituida por 5 hermanos. Estamos ubicados en el municipio de Buenos Aires, departamento del Cauca, en el país Colombia.
Thank you. Maybe you can let us know how long the company has existed for
Gracias.
as Mr. Bamba joins the call.
Ok, inicialmente nuestra empresa bueno, nuestra actividad era realizada por nuestros padres y nuestros abuelos y desde el 2013 nosotros los hermanos constituimos la compañía minera Correa Chavestán, la cual lleva 11 años operando. Esta empresa está situada en Buenos Aires, donde hay una cooperativa de mineros de la cual nosotros hacemos parte y nuestra compañía cuenta con un contrato de operación para operar minas.
Thank you, Mr. Juan. Thank you for making the time to be here today.
Muchas
Mr.
gracias por la
Bamba,
invitación.
Mr. Bamba Zachary, if you're on the call, would you please kindly introduce yourself?
I think he dropped off as well. I did see him for a moment. There he is. I'll ask him to unmute.
Okay. Kindly unmute yourself, Mr. Bamba. And Lawrence? We're having technical difficulties. Apologies for the delay in introductions. I can see that Mr. Bamba is on the call.
Yeah. Maybe you want to come back later, Candace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. How are you?
Enfin,
Okay. Maybe we can go back to Lawrence and get his introduction. Hi, Lawrence, are you on the call? I can see on the chat box that somebody has an issue with the translation feature. Mr.
Yeah, I'm
Gilbert,
working on.
okay.
I think maybe we should just keep going.
Okay,
Can we, and I'll work on the translation. Thanks.
thanks, Mona. So maybe we can start. The next part of this session was supposed to be a discussion session with the miner. So the goal of this session was to get the perspective on both their access to formal and informal financing. Informal financing, what the terms they got, what special considerations they got, what are the timelines in both formal and informal financing. Their experience so far with both of these mechanisms and what the ideal best case scenario for ASGM financing is. So I would like to start here. Maybe I can start with you, Mr. Juan. I can see that Mr. Bamba is back online. Would you be able to introduce yourself, Monsieur Bamba, if you can hear me?
Oui, je vous entends très bien. Je suis M. Bamba Zakari, je suis le président du groupement de petites mines de Côte d'Ivoire et le groupement de la fête des sociétés coopératives minières de Côte d'Ivoire. Vous m'entendez? Vous m'entendez?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Dieu merci. OK. Donc,
Thanks for
c'est
your
tout pour la
introduction, Mr.
présentation.
Bamba.
Hein. C'est tout ce que je peux dire. Je ne sais pas si ça a été rapide ou bien si je dois répéter.
No, that's completely fine. Mr. Bamba is the president for the Union of Small Scale Mining Operators and gold buyers in Côte d'Ivoire. He is coming to us straight from the Ivory Coast. Thank you for being here today.
Merci.
Yeah. So for the next session, as we wait for Lawrence to join the call, I think he's having technical difficulties. Some of the discussion points today is I would like to ask each of the miners online, maybe starting with you, Mr. Juan, coming from Colombia, having managed a mine site that has existed for the last 13 years. How are you currently financing your mining operations on site? What from the business, or have you been able to access loans in the past? Maybe tell us a bit more about the type of financing that you have at the company.
Ok, perfecto. Sí, escucho perfectamente. Nuevamente, muchas gracias por la invitación y un cordial saludo a todos los de la mesa. Nosotros inicialmente empezamos desde cero, por decirlo así. Formamos nuestra empresa y la financiación básicamente fue capital que colocamos cada uno de nosotros. Las minas ya estaban construidas y lo que hicimos fue empezar a reglamentarlas. Y nuestra financiación se basó prácticamente en la reinversión de capital. Básicamente eso era lo que íbamos sacando y pagábamos todos los gastos y las ganancias que quedaban las reinvertíamos. ¿Esto para qué? Para tener mucha más eficiencia tanto en la explotación como en el beneficio. Pudimos acceder a un crédito básicamente después de más de 10 años. Precisamente en enero del año actual, en la cual, gracias a la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia, que tiene una conexión con planetGOLD y con ARM, se pudo llegar a esta financiación, la cual nos resultó positiva para realizar la compra de unas maquinarias. Esto básicamente de acuerdo a la financiación.
No, that's clear, financing. And maybe Emma from Uganda, the Mubenda Miners Association, you can tell us how the cooperative mine site funds the operations at the mine?
Thank you so much, Hans. We don't have any kind of form of financing. Basically, what we do is the gold buyers lend money to the miners, and at the time of purchase, they reduce the money they have lent the miners. Of late, we date with Solidaridad and the supported women form a cooperative society. So they save money and then they lend themselves. Then when they form these groups, the members of the groups are the only ones who can borrow from themselves and then pay back later after processing their hours. The biggest challenge is the kind of licensing regime that we have in the country. Is complicated for one person to have a license. The formal lending institutions do not believe in miners and also do not understand the system of mining. They can lend people in farming, they can lend people in these small businesses, but for mining, they really don't do. What we do usually is miners, gold buyers, or people within the same system that lend each other.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is that everybody that's a member of the cooperative contributes a share to the cooperative, and this is what is used.
Become a member, you
for the
must
investment.
You pay for membership and then also you buy shares within the cooperative. So for a member of cooperative, you can borrow money and then pay back later, because the community you live in, they know you, they know what you do, they can assess how much you need, whether you're able to pay or not. And you can also use part of your colleagues to be your surety within the cooperative society.
Yeah, maybe you can provide a bit of context to the participants on the sector, on the session today. How many miners does Muma Cooperative have at the moment? And maybe let us know a bit more about the gold volume per month, just so we know the scale of your operations at the mine site.
So Muma is the umbrella association that has multiple affiliations. The association has 22 other member associations. So Muma has a license that is on 1 square kilometer mining space. So we have different groups. We have small companies. We have cooperative societies that are part of Muma. And now the Solidarity that supported one of the women groups to access finance by they gave them seed capital. Then they started also saving, and then they started borrowing from the cooperative, buying their own machinery. Muma, in general, has a membership of 1,800 people, members who are in different associations. So, in general, in total, produce between 3 to 5 kgs per month for the whole association, different groups aggregated together.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you for the context. And I see that Lawrence is on the line now. Maybe Lawrence, before we continue, you could briefly introduce yourself to everyone on the call. Let us know how long you have been a miner for, the operations where you come from, and the mining company that you represent on the call today. Kindly open your video as you do this. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. My name is Lawrence Odiwor Ndago. Yes, a miner from Kenya. I do mining through an organization which I co-founded called Multiflow Geoconsult and Services Limited. I am a member of the cooperative group within the region called MIGMA. I'm a member of the National Mining Artisanal Mining Group called ASMAC. And I am a board member of a local mining cooperative called North Kamagambo Mining and Marketing Cooperative Society. Through my company, we've done mining from 2019. That is from the feasibility study up to the phase we are in currently. For the introduction, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lawrence, for joining us today. And maybe just to put you on the spot before I go to Mr. Bamba, can you tell us how you're currently financing your mining operations at Multiflow?
Okay, thank you very much. At Multiflow, currently, I must say that we combine formal and informal financing models.
Mm-hmm.
And we use equity. Multiflow is a limited company founded by 3 directors. So the 3 directors contributed some money from their own savings to start the real venture. That's what kickstarted the company. And now, within the process, we professionalized it, ensured that we are running it as a business because that's the mandate of our organization. Our aim is to transform artisanal mining or artisanal and small-scale mining into viable business ventures. So through that, we were able to monitor all that we were doing through record keeping, through some analysis. And I must say that that's what propelled us into accessing formal financing, because the needs, whatever they require, to analyze and to see how the company is progressing and doing in mining were available then. Alternative source of financing, apart from the formal, which came through lease to purchase, apart from that, and the members' contributions, there are informal financing available on the ground, which we are taking advantage of. That is through, mostly currently we are dealing with those who buy gold on the ground, those who buy tailings on the ground. We have an arrangement with them so that they can, when we need some cash urgently, they can advance us whatever we require on the agreement that by the time whatever they may need, we are able now to consider them as the first purchasers. So through that, we are able to finance both immediate needs of the company and long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. And then maybe now we can get the perspective from Mr. Bamba on how, you know, the operations that you exist in currently finance their work.
Oui, ben, j'ai des informations. Hein. Je pense bien que tous les modèles qui ont été précités font partie aussi de ce type de modèle de financement. Mais en Côte d'Ivoire, le financement formel n'existe pratiquement pas. Je pourrais le dire ainsi parce que c'est toujours le système calculé sur la base des différents acheteurs qui éventuellement font des préfinancements sur les différents sites artisanaux. Et à partir de là, le produit directement leur revient de facto à l'achat. Donc, ce sont ces types de financements informels que vous avez. Et jusqu'à aujourd'hui, il n'y a aucun système d'établissement financier n'est mis en place en tant que tel. Donc, ça n'existe pratiquement pas. Aucun établissement bancaire n'est dans ce système de financement formel au niveau des sociétés coopératives ou au niveau des structures d'exploitation minière semi-industrielle ou artisanale. Et c'est toujours un peu cette approche que nous faisons. Deuxièmement, le type d'approche, c'est le financement basé sur éventuellement personnel, de manière que éventuellement c'est vous-même qui prenez l'initiative de regrouper non seulement les artisans, reprendre leur production et aller effectivement les écouler sur le marché local. Et au fur et à mesure, comme ça, vous pouvez éventuellement rentrer dans un processus d'autofinancement. Donc, de telle sorte qu'à la longue, ça va vous permettre de pouvoir faire des épargnes et constituer éventuellement des fonds d'achat d'équipement qui pourraient vous permettre de pouvoir subvenir vraiment à vos charges. Donc, voici les types de financement que nous avons. Tout est des financements informels. Il n'y a pas de financement formel, à ma connaissance, jusqu'à preuve du contraire.
Thank you, Mr. Bamba. So what I have gotten from our miners outside of Colombia, in Kenya, Uganda, and at least in Cote d'Ivoire, there are no formal financial mechanisms that exist yet. And so the miners at hand normally use personal financing, or they sometimes use financing from outsiders, like in the case of Multiflow, from the individuals that buy the gold tailings. Maybe coming back to you, Lawrence and Emma. So in terms of the informal financing, in terms of the informal financing that you have received so far, how was the engagement with the other party before which you were able to get the finance that you required, whether it was equipment or whether it was cash that you needed? What were the terms? How are you going to pay back? Was it on interest rate, or was it in gold production? Was it in any other mechanism that we are yet to be aware of? Maybe you could give us your perspective on this. And the timeline for the contract, how long did it take for you to be able to fully repay back, or was it up to until money was depleted? Maybe tell us about the special considerations of your engagement with informal finances. Maybe we can start with Lawrence.
Yes, thanks very much, Candice. I must say that Multiflow, as a company, took time to establish itself on the ground. And it is through that we are able to identify some of the informal lenders who are available on the ground based on our capacity. However, I must also confirm that within the same space, there are players who are not as established as Multiflow may have been at the moment or before then. And getting informal finances now varies between individual and the lender. The agreement is based on individual basis, so they don't have like a standard way of doing what they are doing. So in our case, for that matter, the agreement was because the demand for some of these materials are very high. So we were able to bargain with the lenders to give us cash, mainly on short-term basis. Now, within 1 or 2 months, it doesn't attract any interest based on the engagements that we had, as long as the repayment is not in cash, but only in the kind of material like the gold tailings and maybe some gold produce that you may have. But in the event that you are unable to give that, then there is a clause that allows you now to repay in cash at a certain interest rate, which is agreeable between us and the lenders themselves. I must say that this is not really a sure way of getting finance, because it is only when it's available and when they need the kind of material they require. So it makes us to maybe contact a few players in the field so that we get whoever is giving us the best bargain within the period that we really think we are comfortable with. But in most cases, the repayment period is based on the accumulation of the kind of material you are accumulating. If it is gold, the faster you accumulate, the better. If it is gold tailings, the faster you accumulate, the better. However, our company discourages currently that kind of practice. We used to do it then because it was an easy way of getting immediate cash, owing to the fact that mining, there are some times when things happen which you need to attend to immediately. So that is discouraged currently, but it still applies in various other neighboring players within the same sector. The duration and the timing of repayment, that is agreeable, but it's usually between 1 month, the time you accumulate whatever you agree in, or between 1 month and as you may agree, but mostly in terms of sharing of the produce or the kind of material that you get from the mining activity. Thank you.
So what I'm getting from you, Lawrence, is informal lenders prefer, rather than cash, they prefer gold or tailings, because then there's a higher chance of them getting more value for their investment outside
Yes.
of cash. Yeah. Emma, can you kindly tell us what kind of informal financing you have been able to receive in the past?
Oh, yes. There are two kind of lenders. There's the big lender who lends the middle lender. So the big lender has established themselves somewhere and they buy gold, for example, because we did gold. And then the middle lender is the one who gets cash from the big lender to come and establish themselves with the mines, and they can lend the miners. Now, also these middle lenders, they understand who has the better materials, and they see the regularity of supply. If, for example, someone has supplied 10 grams of gold every 3 days consistently for 1 month, they can even give you money without an agreement because they know you're going to bring the gold. And also, this middle lender, if he's supplying per week 0.5 kilo to the large lender, they can give them money without any agreement. They know they are regular suppliers, and they can even send them money without writing anyway, at no interest rate. It's about supply. Can you supply? So, but there are instances where they know this mine was productive, and maybe there was a problem of water, there was a problem of a very hard rock, and they needed some equipment, and then you can, within 2 or 3 months, you can put it back to production, and then there you have to sign an agreement, so that when you reach the hour, because money will stay for long, you're going to at least sell me at maybe 10% discount. So as a miner, you can agree, because you don't have money to buy the equipment. If you don't, they're going to advance, let me say $10,000, and then within the 3 months, when you start producing, you sell them a certain amount of gold at 10% discount. Now, lenders work on sure deals. They don't just work on speculation. No lender is going to give you to start a new mine. They need to know whether that mine was producing and how much it was producing and what the reason is why it stopped producing. Then they can advance you. When it comes to tailings, nowadays the lenders have become so sharp. In the past, they used to lose money. They go ahead to go and pick some samples of tailings and get their PPMs. So they know if you have, for example, 1,000 tons of tailings, estimating, and each ton is 1.5 grams, that's about 1.5 kgs of gold. And they know the recovery rate and the margin of error. So they know probably going to recover about 700 grams. Today's rate, maybe 50,000 USD. So they cannot lend you more than half of that value. Yeah. And the two, the processing at the tailings level, there are controls. For example, at the carbon chambers, lenders put their padlocks. So they can wait for you for as long as you want. 2 months, 3 months, for as long as they have their padlocks there. So at the time of harvest, they will have to be there physically to get their money. So just in case you did not perform as expected, they'll take part of their money, leave you with a balance, and you go and they redo your work. And there is even the other daily lenders. Someone comes in a day, you want 100,000, you get 100 shillings. And then they give you 100,000, and every 2 days, if you have not paid, you give them interest of 10,000. Yeah. Now that's about 10% for every 2 days. So these kind of lendings don't have formal papers that you won't say. It is just at a personal level. There are people who are going to come, probably they bought equipment for another side of the country, and they did not work there, and they want to bring them to you. And that's also another form of lending. People have equipment that they bought and they fail to use them. They miscalculated probably, and they bring them in form of what? Of I know I'm going to lend you this equipment, then you pay me in form of what? Well, most lenders are part of the sector. They are either equipment sellers or gold buyers. You're not going to find someone with a microfinance, any other lending business to lend a gold miner, unless it's even when they are spouses, it's quite difficult. So basically, that has been operating, but we have now gone to a level where we are engaging the Bank of Uganda to understand the business, because also Bank of Uganda is interested in stocking some of our products. So we are trying to see how Bank of Uganda can stand in. Their work is first of all to quantify the deposits that we have, because most of the miners, where they are, they don't know what they are mining, what is there, how much is there. So we only know what is on the surface, because now we can really get samples and do some laboratory tests and understand if you have such tailings, this is what I expect. And that was been the problem with the banks, because they could not lend someone who is just expecting, and they don't know what they are expecting. So in the past few months, the Bank of Uganda has really approached us, and we are working out to see how they can help us in exploration and they understand what we have. The only fear for ASMs is that our countries, when the deposit is big, they will say it's not fit for you. They will go to Europe and call someone and they say, this one, you can help us get it for us. This one will not manage. That's only our fear. But we think going forward, there is a very big interest and willingness by government to start finding ways of funding my.
Yeah. Thank you, Emmanuel.
As we talk about this, remember they are informal miners, and the formal miners, but the biggest number is informal. They don't have licenses. Now that's the biggest problem, because how can you lend someone who is not identified, who doesn't have an address, who is not recognized by the government, by the law of the land? So now you cannot form illegality. You cannot fund illegality. So, but a small percentage of miners have been legalized. The law has changed, and I hope 1-2 years from now, with support from all stakeholders that are interested, like planetGOLD, we shall have a much more formalized way of funding miners in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That was very informative, especially the point that you made on the miners' fear that involvement by the government would mean that they would rather give the concessions to large-scale players rather than miners, because they fear that miners might not be manage the resources available. I think that's a fear that Kenyans can also, relate with. Maybe, Mr. Bamba, you can let us know about the informal financing, the details of the informal financing sector in Côte d'Ivoire.
Ben, je ne pourrais pas partager grande chose, hein, parce que ce qui serait très, très important, c'est de voir un peu les expériences des autres pays par rapport éventuellement au financement formel. Ben, quant au financement informel, c'est une prise en charge, c'est-à-dire que les exploitants eux-mêmes qui se prennent en charge avec des opérateurs et d'acheteurs qui éventuellement vont contribuer à développer petit à petit leur économie. Et donc, ça, c'est un peu quelque chose qui est un peu délicat, d'autant plus que les moyens ne sont jamais suffisants. Ça, c'est un. Et puis, deuxièmement, le risque est beaucoup plus grand quant à réellement l'implication de l'acheteur auprès des opérateurs eux-mêmes. Donc, à ce niveau-là, on a un peu de soucis. Et troisièmement aussi, il faut aussi dire que les mines en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est beaucoup plus accompagné du contenu local. Donc, par conséquent, ça demande des financements au niveau des prestations au niveau de différentes communautés, bénéficier ou faire participer la communauté aux intérêts partagés, aux bénéfices partagés par les mines. Et ça devient beaucoup plus compliqué. Ici, nous sommes beaucoup exposés à ce niveau-là, à l'envahissement des autres opérateurs asiatiques tels que les Chinois et autres, qui éventuellement ne sont pas très alléchants pour le développement même du secteur de la petite mine. Donc, ce sont ces différents facteurs-là qui éventuellement nous permettent de ne pas vraiment apprécier ce qui se passe. Donc, pour moi, l'expérience qu'il faut partager plutôt, comment va se faire un plan de financement formel au niveau éventuellement quelle peut être la participation des ONG à ce développement-là. Et donc, comme ce que j'ai entendu tout à l'heure par rapport à Solidarité, qui éventuellement peut faire des accompagnements, peut-être en équipement ou peut-être en financement. Bon, ça, c'est des expériences qui sont beaucoup plus intéressantes à pouvoir partager. Mais pour le moment, nous ne sommes pas à ce niveau-là en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, ce genre d'approche, nous n'en avons pas. Et nous n'avons pas aussi des informations correctes là-dessus. Donc, on souhaiterait vraiment avoir plus d'informations sur ces différents types d'approches au niveau des ONG et autres qui accompagnent le secteur de la petite mine. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Bamba. And on the question on the role of NGOs, maybe we could wait until later on the call for us to address that. I know on the call are several representatives from different non-governmental organizations from across the world. Maybe you could already add into the chat box, what some of your thoughts are, or you could already raise your hand if you have something to say. Please do not hesitate. I want this to be as engaging as possible with regards to your experience so far, and where you are able to draw parallels on the experience that the miners are speaking on and the experience that you have experienced on the ground. Maybe you could already let us know through the chat box, or maybe raise your hand and we could go on this. But on the role of NGOs, maybe I could already quip in and say, what we are doing at the Impact Facility is leveraging donor financing. So we have grant financing from several institutional grants like the EPRM that we use with investment financing in order to be able to provide equipment to miners on the ground. So NGOs' role in this case can be to de-risk the investments of formal financing institutions through capacity support, through field engagement, and provide context on the experience of ASGM and how different it is from other sectors like farming and other SMEs in order to make financial institutions more comfortable in engaging in this sector. But more on that later on. So maybe we could already go to the next slide, which dealt with, maybe we could go back to Mr. Juan. Juan already mentioned as part of the call that the company that he operates at has been able to receive a loan from CFA, which is a cooperative financier in Colombia in partnership with planetGOLD. Maybe Mr. Juan, you could already tell us what the application process was like, why you chose to engage with CFA and not any of the other banks that you have approached. What was the perspective of the other banks that you approached in terms of financing you, and why did you decide eventually to go with CFA? And just give us metrics on, is it like a loan capital? What's the timeline for the contract? Are there any special considerations that you took, and how the engagement so far is working with a formal financial institution?
Ok. Cuando se inició el proceso con planetGOLD junto a ARM, también nos acompañó la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia. En este proceso, que hubo el acompañamiento, capacitaciones y todo, una vez se terminó el programa de planetGOLD, aperturamos cuenta con CFA y al ellos estudiar nuestros documentos y vieron nuestros números financieros, dijeron que para nosotros podía haber una opción de financiación, que si le apostábamos a esto y claro, nosotros como necesitábamos también tener vida crediticia y financiamiento, accedimos a optar por el crédito. Nos pidieron los documentos y efectivamente sí se pudo dar la financiación por parte de la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia. Sin embargo, la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia nos abrió la puerta para un crédito. Habíamos tocado puertas de otros bancos y otras entidades financieras, las cuales siempre nos dicen que no. Como lo decía el colega anteriormente, es que en Colombia pasa lo mismo. Tenemos una puerta cerrada y esa puerta es blindada para acceder a créditos bancarios por parte de bancos tanto públicos como de entidades privadas. Nos solicitan un sinnúmero de requisitos, de documentos, pero en el momento de otorgar el crédito son muy subjetivos, pues por el solo hecho de ser una empresa dedicada a la minería, ya no cierran las puertas para acceder al crédito. No nos miran los números, no nos miran desde cuándo realizamos la actividad, si realizamos directamente la exportación, no. Ellos ven, tienen una actividad minera, esa persona no se le puede dar un crédito. La experiencia
Thank
que
you for that.
excuse me, la experiencia que hemos tenido con la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia hasta el momento ha sido muy positiva porque precisamente necesitábamos un crédito para expandir nuestras operaciones en la planta de beneficio. Aunque el crédito, en consideración a lo que necesitamos, fue muy poquito, es el inicio de una relación crediticia con este banco y esperamos que también nos ayude para que otros bancos o otras entidades financieras nos abran la puerta. Se nos dieron unas condiciones, las aceptamos y hasta el momento vamos cumpliendo a cabalidad con todos los requisitos.
Yeah. And what is the timeline of your contract with CFA? Did they give you a grace period or any special considerations given that mining is very different from other SME sector? What interest rates have they provided to you? And do you think it's fair given your engagement in the sector in the long term?
Ok, el proceso para que se nos otorgara el crédito empezó en el mes de noviembre del año pasado y se nos adjudicó en el mes de enero. Se demoró más o menos un proceso de 3-4 meses. La tasa de interés está aproximadamente entre un 25 y un 27% dado a que es el DTF más el 12.5%. Entonces dependemos de que si el DTF baja o sube, entonces también esto mismo pasa con los intereses. En mi concepto son muy altos, pero pues era lo que teníamos. Hubieron muchos requisitos, o uno de los requisitos extra fue que cada uno de los accionistas firmara pagarés y quedaran como codeudores. Entonces quedó la empresa como deudora principal y los accionistas y representante legal como codeudores. Otro requisito era que teníamos que abrir un CDT por el valor del 5% del préstamo. Y aparte del seguro que se paga con los intereses, teníamos que pagar como una especie de otro seguro, el cual es deducible de renta. Esos fueron uno de los requisitos, los cuales pues hace que al final no recibiéramos, hablando de dinero colombiano, 200 millones de pesos, que son más o menos unos 50.000 dólares, sino que en la realidad recibiéramos un 10% menos, porque cuando se depositó, se depositaron 180 millones, 190 millones. Entonces, hace que también estemos como muy limitados.
Yeah, that's a really nice context to provide for us. I can see that we have representatives from planetGOLD Burkina Faso, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but in planetGOLD Burkina Faso, which is one of the more successful phase 1 implementing countries with regards to their financial inclusion mechanism, the planetGOLD team was able to provide a guarantee to a local bank in the country of, I think, $50,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Saido. And then the bank was able to leverage this financing to invest into the sector, given that they could recover a certain percentage, I think 30% of the money given to the miners with any defaults. And so planetGOLD in Faso de-risk the investment by the financial partner, which is Coris International Bank, which is the same thing that planetGOLD Colombia did, as per my knowledge. So planetGOLD Colombia used some of their financing, I think it was 66,000 USD as a guarantee to some of the microfinances to risk the investment into the sector. And what makes Burkina Faso very special in this case was that the bank was also then able to leverage a climate fund through the government, so that the interest rate that was given to miners was some of the lowest that we have seen, at least as per our documentation. So the miners were able to get an interest rate of 8% per year, which is even lower than the commercial interest rate in Kenya and in several of the other countries, making it very easy for miners to engage, at least making it, So in terms of, maybe we could go next to Mr. Lawrence. I know, Lawrence, you've been able to receive financing from an equipment provider in the past. Maybe you could tell us more about what your engagement with the impact, and how do you feel about the terms of engagement, what they were, and what your perspective is so far, given that you've also been able to access informal financing in the past. So what has been your perspective on each, starting with formal financing?
Yes, thank you very much. I must confirm that before we received financing from the impact facility, which we engaged with it for 2 years, we were in the process of engaging a local bank to be able to get some finance facility from them to finance some of the, or to rather to buy some of the equipment that we needed by then. But the process was taking too long. The requirements were, some of them could not meet, going by the fact that mining is a regulated sector in Kenya and requires a permit. Therefore, as you earlier said, it is really considered a risky venture by lenders, formal lenders.
Yeah.
So in the process, we came across the impact facility with whom we engaged through lease to own. Lease to own in the sense that they were giving us the equipment that we required, which we were to repay within a period of 2 years, after which we were to own the equipment. So the process took, I can say the onboarding process took slightly long. It was between 3 to 4 months, just for them to understand what you are, why we were doing it, and the level at which we were. And I must say at this level that most formal lenders, even informal, usually go for mines that are in production. But now, how do you prove that you are in production? That now becomes the big question in the mining sector, because most, if not all, of the players, due to some reasons, maybe fear of being followed up, payment of some dues or something, do not keep the requisite records, do not have the legal existence, even in terms of registration, just over business name. Now, with us, we had overcome all those, and we were able to prove to the impact facility that indeed we are a registered entity. Indeed, we are doing mining in a specific area. We could prove the process that we had undertaken before up to where we were. In terms of record keeping, they were able to, it was traceable. They were able to trace all that we were doing. So the process, the onboarding process became a little easier, except for the levels, which require maybe, that was internal in their areas. And it was really based on now how much you can receive. That's the risky aspect of it. But I must say the whole process was okay. It didn't take unnecessarily long. And I must say the contract had some terms which were flexible and accommodative to us who are the mining community, because as my brother from Uganda mentioned the other time, mining has its own challenges. And sometimes when it comes to monthly repayments, chances are that you may miss 1 or 2 months due to some reasons, maybe mine flooding or some eventuality that may have occurred. So the flexibility allowed us to negotiate payment breaks, part of which was in the contract that we could enjoy at least one within 12 months. Then that one made our lives easy because we didn't need to negotiate more, but the flexibility was something which we were really counting on, which was not there in the other lenders who are the banks. And apart from that, the impact facility within their onboarding process made us understand everything upfront, whatever the contract entailed, the small writings, everything. And we were able to negotiate some which were not, we thought were not really good for us. We were able to negotiate. And I think that's what maybe prolonged the process, because they would bring something, we raise a question, then internally they agree and we find a common ground. Ultimately, we were able to secure the items, use them to our advantage, and to this day, we have fully repaid that, which is now owned by our company, and we can use them in whatever way. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Maybe one thing you have not mentioned is how much the equipment contract value was, for the sake of the speakers on the call. Yeah, and the interest rate that you were able to receive. And maybe you could provide your perspective on whether, given your involvement with informal financiers in the past, whether you think the interest rate or the terms were favorable, at least with your engagement with the impact facility, what your honest perspective is. Was the interest rate too high, or was it fair? Or what do you think could be changed as some of the planetGOLD implementing countries look to implement their own work? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. The contract amount was 8,018 US dollars. That was the contract amount. Yeah. We were to provide 10% of the amount as co-financing as part of our commitment. And the interest rate was 15%. And I think that was a little favorable, owing to the fact that informal financiers, much as they do not have a specific interest rate or you can negotiate, since it is not cash, you may not know whatever they are getting. For example, if you talk about all sharing, like for example, if somebody comes in with an equipment which you are using in your mine, you agree on a certain share. You may not know exactly what the person is getting. And even if you know, especially when the grades are good, there's nothing you can do about it. You only have to do whatever you agreed. And to a great extent, sometimes if the grades are not good, this person can withdraw the equipment at will. You will not agree on anything. So I can say for the formal lenders like TIF who gave us the equipment, there was no such risk of having the equipment withdrawn at any given time, unless it would take seriously a sort of agreement, maybe failure to repay, some procedure which we could really work around. But for informal lenders, if such was the case with an informal lender, he can wake up one day, once he gets maybe someone who needs the equipment and maybe has a rich vein wherever he's mining, he will just come in the morning, pick the equipment, whatever it is, and goes his way. So such risk was not there in formal equipment leasing that we had. Now, I must say that the onboarding, going by the nature of mining, sometimes the moment you realize that you require a certain equipment or some cash need, sometimes it's somehow urgent, I must say. And in implementing the finance products, maybe informal or formal, whoever is interested in, the onboarding period, if possible, should start prior to maybe the time one has a need. So a survey should be done so that you know those who are mining within the area, whatever you require from them, documentation, so that with that data, when somebody requires something, you just know the rates, whatever you can give and whatever you cannot give. Because at some point, it is the difference between success and failure in mining. Failure to get something, equipment or money within a specific period can really take you back and can really drain the finances that maybe one had invested in the mining sector. So such durations, if changed, then the miners can benefit from that. On the other hand, the kind of financing that is given, the capping, sometimes one may require cash as opposed to equipment. So there should be that mix, which is somehow favorable to the person, to the miner who requires whatever mix. Because when you have an equipment and you don't have maybe money to pay workers, sometimes the equipment may be idle. So such mix should really be there when considering issues to do with financing, the possibility. So if one wants such mix, it should be available as opposed to maybe an equipment. However, it is important to do some prior work to ensure that it is possible by the lenders to prove that a mine is in production. How do you do that? As I've said earlier, there must be records to show that. There must be some bank dealings to show that, because currently all money assumes that there should be banks, so you can show that. But if somebody is not aware of such, then it is assumed that at the point of engagement, that is when the person is beginning what? The business. So such can be helpful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for that. Maybe I could take it back to you, Mr. Juan. Yesterday when we spoke, you talked about certain financial arrangement that you wanted to get into with a certain individual or company to get equipment for your mine site, but then you decided not to go ahead. Would it be possible for you to share the context of that and why the company decided not to go ahead with this financing arrangement and chose to go with CFA instead, just to provide you know, a perspective on how your business operates?
Ok. Nosotros en el 2017, precisamente, tuvimos una asociación con unos extranjeros, los cuales buscaron unas máquinas que necesitábamos en ese tiempo, que eran celdas de flotación, y esto era para nosotros poder recuperar los concentrados de oro. Sin embargo, cuando empezamos a realizar el estudio sobre este mercado, nos dimos cuenta que el valor comercial que ellos nos pagaban no era acorde al valor comercial del mercado. Cuando ya empezamos a renegociar, vimos que no querían aceptar nuestras condiciones, entonces nosotros decidimos terminar el acuerdo. Nosotros recibimos el crédito con CFA, fue 7 años después, que fue este año, en el 2024. Y dado a que las condiciones que nos exigía la persona con la que nos estábamos asociando no era acorde a nuestras necesidades, entonces decidimos terminar ese contrato, esa asociación. Nosotros empezamos a realizar la concentración de los lodos, de esos materiales que se desechan, y empezamos a concentrarlo nuevamente. Y con esto empezamos a refinanciar y a acondicionar la planta para que fuese una planta para recuperar doré y para recuperar concentrados de oro. Entonces, actualmente nuestro mercado está enfocado en el doré y en los concentrados de oro. Dado a estas condiciones en la cual se dio la asociación con estos extranjeros, y ver que básicamente el gane-gane era totalmente de ellos y que no nos representaba ninguna ganancia a nosotros, entonces decidimos terminar este tipo de asociación. Actualmente no estamos asociados con ninguna otra empresa ni ninguna otra persona, y como lo dije anteriormente, nuestra financiación se basó en la reinversión de capital hasta llegar a un punto de equilibrio y ya poder empezar a realizar una producción plena. Ya en este año fue donde empezamos a tocar puertas nuevamente para créditos, y es donde apareció CFA y nos dio la oportunidad de contar con un crédito de aproximadamente $50,000 americanos.
Thank you, Mr. Juan. Thank you for this. And maybe we could go back to Lawrence. Lawrence, you said before that prior to your engagement with the Impact Facility, you know, Multiflow Incorporated was already operating as an SME. You had an SME-centric approach in terms of your record keeping, in terms of the management of the company. I would like to know if after the engagement with the formal financier and the due diligence process that you had to undergo in order to access the equipment financing and the equipment thereof, did such an engagement affect the way that you run things on the ground? Was there an improvement, or did everything remain the same in terms of how you manage Multiflow on the ground?
Yes, thank you so much. Now, in most cases, I hope you can hear me correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm saying yes. In most cases, when there's somebody who's watching your back, someone who is keen to follow what you are doing is around there, then you must change how you are doing your things or improve for that matter. Within our engagement period, the impact facility within the contract had what is called the non-financial obligations that we were to meet within the period of the contract. And there were reviews within specific periods. And therefore, apart from the financial aspect, there were issues that we were supposed to monitor and take care of, both in terms of health and safety, in terms of maintenance of the environment, in terms of the workplace arrangement. So some of these things, we had not considered them urgent before, but after the engagement with the impact and the onboarding process, it became like an obligation which should be met within a specific period. And we were able now to fast track each and every one of them. And I can say that's what made us to improve seriously in terms of changing even where we are in terms of workers having PPEs, the working area being fenced, which was not in existence earlier. Within the whole ASM sector, I can say within the region you are working in. So those are some improvements that we can really attribute to engagement with TIF. And again, within the periodic visits, they engage some professionals like mine engineers, people of environment, and a number of some people who could now look at things with a different eye and advise on the way to go about each and every aspect that you are able to do. And that aside, I can say also that in terms of knowledge, the area, because as I said earlier, our reason for coming into the venture was to transform it into a viable business venture so that people can view it differently. So through our engagement with the TIF, they were able to organize, or we were able to partner and organize some training activities, which not only took into consideration members of the Multiflow, but also those who are operating within the area. So we could pick a few of them, put them among our team, and they were able to benefit from the trainings that were offered through TIF and other partners like Solidaridad. So we were able also, I must mention here, to bring on board some of the landowners, because we are working on a private land, and some engagements were becoming a little difficult because the landowner was not understanding why we had to do certain things a certain way. So when we brought them in some of the trainings, they were able to understand how things should be done, the reason why we are doing what we are doing, and the broader engagement where mining is headed. So I must say engagement with the TIF brought a lot of improvements from our side and within the sector and the region, the area we are operating.
Thank you, Lawrence. And maybe to provide context to everyone that's joining, the non-financial obligations that Mr. Lawrence was speaking about, the way the equipment lease to purchase model is set up is such that entry for miners to receive the first cohort of investment is very easy. So all we need as the impact facility is business registration, given that formalization is slow to operate in the region. So we need a business registration so that we know that the government is aware of the activities. We need the mining operation to have the land rights that they operate, whether this is through a title deed or through a legal agreement with the owner of the land. We also need the miners to be in production for at least 6 months prior to the investment, and for them to have the records that are needed. So this is why the process of onboarding takes a couple of months. So
Candace,
yes.
your Wi-Fi is going in and out, so it's difficult to hear that last part. Maybe you want to try off camera.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay,
It's been
give me one
kind
second.
Thank you. And just repeat what you were saying there, please.
Oh yeah. So I was saying we make it very easy for miners to be able to join, but then to access additional financing, we encourage that miners improve certain environmental, social, and governance criteria that we support in the continuous improvement. As he said, we provide experts at the site during our periodic visits to improve in the OHS management or mercury management. And then we ask that the miners report back every quarter on some of the improvements that they have made against the worker rights, the governance of the mine site, the mercury use at the mine site, and if they're able to pass certain criteria, then they are able to access bigger buckets of investment as their second or subsequent investments. So those are some of the non-financial obligations. They're voluntary, but we highly encourage to incentivize mine improvements. And maybe as we come to the end of this miner session, I would like maybe for Juan to tell us what the perks of receiving or what the advantages he has gotten from receiving the formal financing and how it has made their operations easier. He said before that they used this financing to to set up a processing facility at their mine site. So maybe let us know about what the engagement with the CFA has enabled in the improvements of your mine site. Maybe tell us a bit more about that.
Ok. Pues básicamente uno de los puntos más positivos es poder contar con fluidez en el capital, dado que el crédito hace que el dinero que inyectamos hacia una maquinaria no tengamos la necesidad de sacarlo de nuestro capital como tal. Entonces esto hace que tengamos una fluidez en el capital para poderlo reinvertir en otras necesidades o hacerlo crecer. Otro punto positivo es el tiempo, dado a que en el momento en que nos dieron el crédito pudimos realizar las inversiones de inmediato y no esperar, por decirlo así, a tener el ahorro para contar con el capital necesario para adquirir esta maquinaria. Otro punto positivo es que con esa financiación creemos, y es la idea que tenemos, es que se nos puedan abrir las puertas en otras entidades financieras o que ya sea con la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia podamos adquirir a créditos de mayor valor. Y todo esto, en conclusión, llega a que el fomento para la pequeña minería en Colombia es básicamente nulo y que las políticas gubernamentales en la OMAPE han sido básicamente un fracaso porque en Colombia contamos con una ley de bancarización minera en la cual se habla de que los pequeños mineros puedan obtener cuentas bancarias y puedan acceder a créditos. Otro punto es que el fomento minero es básicamente nulo. Y al no tener o no contar con un fomento minero para las pequeñas empresas mineras y para los mineros artesanales, hace que las necesidades por las cuales se someten los pequeños mineros en el momento de formalizarse o ya formalizados para acceder al mercado sea demasiado complicado. Los pequeños mineros y los mineros artesanales básicamente tienen una recuperación entre un 20 y un 30% de material que extrae cuando hablamos de minería de filón. Entonces, al no contar con un fomento minero, con un apoyo económico y tener las puertas cerradas al momento de obtener unos créditos, no se le saca el provecho de un 70 o un 90% de toda la riqueza que tiene el yacimiento. Entonces, impulsar a que la política minera en Colombia apoye y aporte más a las OMAPE y que los bancos le abran la puerta a los créditos y tanto a los créditos como a las cuentas bancarias de los pequeños mineros sería un punto muy factible, sobre todo en una política económica, tanto económica como social, porque esto da un impacto social. ¿Qué más se puede opinar sobre esto? Que vemos que los países necesitan básicamente de apoyos de organizaciones para que se puedan ser observados este tipo de empresas, este tipo de pequeños mineros, de mineros artesanales, porque básicamente el gobierno de cada uno de los países que estamos aquí representando los ve como como nulos, no le da un apoyo significativo y en vez de impulsar a que estos pequeños mineros crezcan, nos tienen con un freno de mano. Entonces, poder crecer con tantas limitaciones es demasiado difícil. Y poder acceder a los mercados, tanto nacionales como internacionales, con unas políticas que fallan, es básicamente nulo y hace que el mercado se vuelva informal, que básicamente lleguemos a créditos de manera informales, porque la necesidad hace que nos impulsemos hacia ese punto. Entonces, agradezco a planetGOLD, a RM, a la Cooperativa Financiera de Antioquia, porque con ellos sí hemos podido obtener estas facilidades y llegar al punto en que la política minera en Colombia, y perdone que lo recalque tanto, se haya podido obtener de manera no directa, sino indirecta, y fomentar la minería poco a poco. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Juan. Yeah, I believe a lot of the miners online and some of the representatives, share a lot of the frustration that you have with regard to the formalization and professionalization of artisanal and small-scale gold miners worldwide. And an interesting fact for everybody on the line is that in Colombia, mining is legal, as with a lot of other countries, but still, despite miners being able to easily access the right permits for artisanal or small-scale miners, the banks are still not willing to engage. So imagine if this is the case for a country where it's already, what happens in countries where, the legal registration is yet to pick up. So that is why a lot of the initiatives represented on the call today are online, and that's why we're having this conversation today. Maybe I would like to go on to Mr. Emmanuel. Maybe you could let us know about, you could describe what an ideal financing method would be in your case, given your involvement with informal financiers through the gold buyers through the gold buyers, the big lenders and the middle lenders, and what you would like to see once, assuming the Bank of Uganda gets on board and starts buying gold from miners. What kind of terms would you anticipate being there on paper so that the miners feel represented and not taken advantage of, given the richness of the sector?
Thank you so much, Gans. One thing you must understand that everyone right now is hunting for gold, and the market for gold is not is everywhere. People reach the mines themselves, the funders. In our country, there is a special fund for almost everything. For farming, you have so many schemes. You have Operation Wealth Creation. We have Yoga. We have so many kind, but for mining, there's nothing. There must be a special fund that probably the government or Bank of Uganda should give the commercial banks, where miners with specific terms can be able to access money. You must understand our business grows. Today, you could be an artisanal miner, and then you hit a jackpot. You have $50,000 all of a sudden, and if you are well managed, and you can expand that money into something big. So miners grew from artisanal to small scale. I'm one of them who started just with hand tools, and I managed to grow a business that is sizable enough that I can even lend my to other miners. So where we are, like in our mine with the population, what we are looking at right now, we are looking for an investment for infrastructure, because you realize we are mining in the hills. Now, if you don't have the road network to get the ores from the hills to the processing centers using trucks, it's not be very costly. They always become economically unviable, because if one sack of ore, you're going to, which has maybe 1.5 grams, you're going to use 300,000 for processing it. It becomes unviable. One time, I really tried to access for more financing from the bank, and I reached there. They told me they would find me. I put all my registration documents, including a copy of the license, and they told me I needed to give security. So I needed about to $45,000 to buy a generator that would do power all the hill and supply power to all the miners. And probably we share the cost of running the generator, and we pay in a period of 1 year. I was so frustrated. They wanted 23%, and they needed the money as fast as possible. And you know, like Lawrence said, mining is not something that you're going to pay every month. You need some time to, I mean, their season is when you, probably in the rainy season, maybe it is hard. You need to have at least a period that is enough for you to prepare, not because you don't want to pay, but because circumstances. So in our case, I look at if there's a special fund for mining, like in Uganda, oil and gas is clear. People in oil and gas, they can get money. They have government guarantees, bank guarantees, but for mining, nothing. But surely, we mine in our land. The licenses are from the government. Why should the government put a special fund or give bank guarantees for us to access money? Miners can pay. Why these informal lenders lend without formal agreements? It's because miners, when they get money, they are able to pay back. Sometimes they can even give you free interest. Say, thank you, you helped me. I'll add you this much. So next time you do what? You help me. Without that, a deliberate effort, because we're having different organizations. As miners grow, they need to grow. So today for me, maybe $20,000 may not be of use at my operations, because I actually tried to engage with Impact Facility some time back, and I had to give them some other groups, because we needed to build a CIP plant for leaching big tailings, and their limit was about $20,000. What we needed was about 150,000 US dollars. So as miners grow, their financing needs are going to be growing. So this time around, Mr. Lawrence got 8,900. Next time, when he has accumulated so many things, we need maybe 90,000. So meaning the financing bit must also be growing at the pace of the miners. Because miners grow every day. Actually, miners are faster than even government sometimes. You're expecting this year, you're planning to implement next year. By the time you reach next year, what you're planning has been overtaken by events. So, and that's what we're encouraging the groups in Uganda, especially those that are involved in supporting miners, and then also the government itself. Lastly, the miners, I've dealt with miners in all parts of Uganda as a national coordinator, and we have needs from where our culture sometimes govern what we do. So it is very important that government understands what we do, because we have so many times having civil society helping miners without even the government understanding what we are doing. We are at a different place. They are also at a different place. You go to a workshop and these ones say we did this, and then they're not aware. So if we can get all activities that we do to be within our the government line, so they understand, so they don't take us backwards. You get it? So we are talking to Bank of Uganda. We are still talking about things of everyone did not formalize it. When other power licenses running and they have paid royalties for the last 10 years, you get it? So there's a lack of, there's information gap between the people in the field and the people that make policy and laws. But that is just for the case of Uganda. I'm not talking for the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I liked what you said about sometimes the government is not even aware of what's going on the ground, and civil society is trying to provide capacity building exercises, yet the government is unaware of, you know, the social economic potential. And I think that's a great point, given that one of the mandates of planetGOLD implementing countries is to support in the formalization of ASGM across the jurisdictions they operate, part of which includes, you know, engaging the different stakeholders outside of miners that are responsible for the implementation of or for the professionalization and formalization of ASGM in the specific countries. And maybe that answers the question that Mr. Bamba had said at the beginning, you know, what is the role of NGOs? So to advocate on behalf of ISM miners, to, you know, the right legislative channels to provide an understanding of the social economic benefit of the sector, to some of the, you know, decision makers in parliament or in these lawmaking bodies. So that's another role for ASGM in the country. You also said, to your point on when you're seeking investment from one of the banks, financing for one of the banks, and they ask you to provide security, which some of the interventions, like at the impact facility, because we are an equipment provision company, what we do is, rather than ask for security, we because we are providing the equipment on a lease basis, and we could take it back at any time if, you know, the other party, the miner, defaults on their repayments, then that's our security on our end, right? Or the guarantees, the NGOs can be able to provide the guarantees to the bank so that they do not need to ask for security from the miners, just like in the case of Colombia and Burkina Faso, where because the projects have, you know, provided guarantees to the banks, the miners are not asked to provide any type of, you know, collateral like equipment or their car or their homes. And to add to that point, the point of asking for security from the miners, especially with regards to female miners across the world, who are even more marginalized than their male counterparts, despite you know, representing almost 50% of the workforce. In a lot of the jurisdictions, because of cultural limitations, women are not able to own equipment. No, sorry, they're not able to own property. And so if you're a banking institution that's asking for collateral from the miners, then you're almost exclusively excluding women from engaging. So it's the role of, you know, NGOs to provide context on the sector to government and finance institutions to understand the kind of dynamics that work, so that in the creation of the specific products for the sector, they are aware of the different gender dynamics, financial dynamics, you know, supply chain dynamics, just to inform the, you know, the work in the end. Maybe I could go back to Mr. Bamba as we finalize this section. Maybe you could let us know, because you said at the beginning that there are no you know, formal financial instruments available for any of the miners in Cote d'Ivoire. And should there be a bank that is willing to engage, or should planetGOLD with Cote d'Ivoire, you know, sit with the miners today and ask, so what would you like to be the case when we are trying to support these banks and microfinance institutions in the design of a product? What kind of, you know, terms would you like to be available, or what kind of financing would you like to be available for your peers in Cote d'Ivoire?
Il faut dire que pour nos collègues en Côte d'Ivoire, la question même des garanties formelles ou même des financements formels, je pourrais dire, au niveau des banques, est quasi inexistant, d'autant plus que les banques d'abord n'ont pas une bonne appréciation des EMAP en Côte d'Ivoire. Ça, c'est un premier fait. Deuxième fait, et l'accompagnement administratif est quasi inexistant. Donc, c'est l'administration qui devait faire la promotion de ce secteur d'activité, mais qui, effectivement, n'est pas trop dans l'aspect des relations privées-privées. Donc, c'est ce côté qui, effectivement, va flotter un peu. Et troisièmement aussi, la Côte d'Ivoire est rentrée dans une lutte contre les mines illégales. Et ça fait qu'éventuellement, aujourd'hui, la communication gouvernementale autour, éventuellement, de ces activités-là est vue dans un autre angle qui n'apprécie pas du tout les établissements financiers, d'autant plus que là où il n'y a pas d'inquiétude, c'est là que les établissements financiers interviennent. Mais quand il y a trop d'inquiétude, effectivement, personne ne veut mettre son argent dans le risque qui éventuellement va permettre de pouvoir faire perdre aux financiers le goût de l'investissement. Donc, à ce niveau, on a vraiment ce problème. Mais ce que nous pourrons dire, peut-être à planetGOLD, de dire que ici en Côte d'Ivoire, il faut revaloriser l'activité. C'est ce qu'il faut vraiment s'accentuer à faire. Voir un peu, présenter l'activité en tant qu'une activité génératrice de revenus. Deuxièmement, une activité qui pourrait permettre d'apporter éventuellement un secours de lutte contre l'appauvrissement de la communauté où éventuellement les mines sont beaucoup plus admises comme activité principale. Et troisièmement, un secours pour pouvoir accompagner le secteur de l'agriculture qui est l'activité phare en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, ce sont ces trois éléments, plus ou moins, que nous, en tant qu'acteurs aujourd'hui, que nous voyons qui pourraient éventuellement contribuer à pouvoir non seulement avoir une visibilité claire sur l'activité des petites mines, mais deuxièmement aussi permettre à l'opinion financière de pouvoir avoir des contributions positives pour accompagner ces mineurs-là. Donc, pour me résumer, je pourrais dire planetGOLD vraiment d'abord serait la bienvenue pour pouvoir orienter un peu éventuellement ces visions sur l'activité en tant que telle et deuxièmement à pouvoir apporter une approche beaucoup plus créative au sein même de l'administration minière en Côte d'Ivoire, au sein du gouvernement, qui éventuellement va accompagner tout le processus. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes très heureux que la Banque mondiale a initié un certain nombre de projets qui tardent encore à pouvoir se concrétiser, mais qui pourraient apporter un aspect positif sur le soutien que éventuellement nous cherchons au niveau de ces différents types de petites mines. Donc, en conclusion, ce que je souhaiterais dire, c'est que l'implication du planetGOLD sera salutaire quant à la révisitation des EMAP en Côte d'Ivoire. Deuxièmement, à apporter un engouement beaucoup plus positif quant au regard que les établissements financiers peuvent porter à cette activité. Par rapport à ce que planetGOLD fait déjà ailleurs, ce serait beaucoup plus souhaitable de pouvoir les orienter ici en Côte d'Ivoire, les soutenir et soutenir aussi les EMAP de telle sorte que ces gens d'engouement génératrices de revenus puissent vraiment naître non seulement au sein de la population, mais les contributions au niveau des EMAP puissent être vraiment beaucoup plus perçues au niveau de l'administration générale. Donc, vraiment, c'est ce que moi je peux dire en dernière position pour pouvoir vous encourager à pouvoir aller dans ce sens-là vis-à-vis de mon pays, mais aussi, ceci pourrait être aussi un appel pour la sous-région, pourquoi pas, pour la région les pays qui nous entourent aussi, parce que pratiquement, c'est les mêmes visibilités et c'est le même genre de politique qui, éventuellement, peuvent contribuer à pouvoir donner plus d'efforts à la production au niveau des artisans ou des petites mines. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Bamba. And you have really summed up the, part of my concluding thoughts for this really well. For example, in Kenya, we have entire communities, at least in Western Kenya, that are entirely dependent on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, which is, wonderful to see on the ground. But for the rest of the country, Yeah, but for the rest of the country, a lot of the Kenyans are also not aware that there's gold mining in the country, right? So it means the communication around the sector, when it happens, it needs to change. Currently, what we see on mainstream media is that it's always just reporting on instances where there's a casualty at the mine sites, and so miners keep being called illegal, which is a term that we do not like to use, at least for us at the impact facility, because if the government or any implementing agencies are aware of your operations on the ground, you are legally registered as a business, if not in the absence of like a mining permit. The policemen and the mining authorities in the region are aware of your activities. Maybe informal might be the better term to call miners rather than illegal. But then the social economic potential or contribution of the miners in these regions is insane. You have entire communities where children are able to go to school because of the money from the financing. As Mr. Emmanuel has just said, you're able to, in a couple of years, shift from ASM, artisanal mining, to small scale mining, because you literally struck gold. And so, yeah, so the perspective of the entire, community needs to change, at least for those that are not directly engaged with the sector. I can see one of the questions in the chat box is it possible for miners to get equipment through equipment leasing companies? Yes. This is the work that we do at the Impact Facility. I know there are a lot of other leasing companies that are able to provide equipment to miners. In Tanzania, there's a couple of them. The terms and conditions are always quite different. But yes, this could be an avenue for planetGOLD implementing countries to potentially explore. Point out, as we summarize this session, that because some of the projects that exist in the sector have like a limited time scope. So like most planetGOLD implementing countries have like a 5-year deadline. In the case of the Impact Facility, our donor financing has a timeline, whether it's 4 years, whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10, there's always a deadline after which, subject to, if we don't get additional financing, we might not continue with our operation. So what happens to miners then? So if we not invest in the continuous improvement of their operations while still working with miners, then a lot of the work that has gone into professionalizing the miners might be lost. So it's also a chance for projects to be pragmatic and realize that we're likely not 5 years that we are operating. We might be able to reach 100 if we are lucky, or not. But yeah. And so as we summarize this session, I can see we have a hand raised by Minimata. Maybe go ahead, Minimata.
Thank you very much. Please, thank you very much for all the presenters. My question is that, please, my name is Ahmed from Nigeria.
Yes.
Please, I want to ask some of the presenters, most especially the presenter from Kenya. It's like Kenya has gone so far. Please, I want to know what technologies you use in mining that are mercury free. That's the first question. And the second question is, what do the miners prefer more? Do they really prefer the equipments or the machinery more, or they prefer the cash? Which one do they really prefer more? Even though I know that the two work side by side. Thank you very much.
Lawrence, will you be able to answer that?
Yes, if you allow me.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. On technologies that are applied in Kenya in terms of mercury-free, so far at the external level, there is use of mercury currently. However, most people are embracing the leaching, the chemical processing aspect. However, it's not friendly for small scale guys, but I must say it is taking root so much. And that's why initially I mentioned that the tailings business, the gold tailings business is currently booming since the leaching has taken root and people are going through that processing aspect as we strive to eliminate mercury. Other technologies that are available are, maybe I can talk of dewatering, of doing things in some areas, in some mines. Currently, we even have oxygen meters, detectors, but though they are not constantly in use, but at least available, some people can use them, and we are able to know where there is poor air circulation so that the people cannot get injured in some mines. It's taking root as well, and it's something which is being embraced step by step. On the question on preference, as you mentioned correctly, that they go hand in hand. And it's true that sometimes the equipment may not be useful if the intended entity does not have the cash to actualize some facts. However, moving forward, and as an advice to our financiers, so there would be financiers in the sector, much as equipments are important, there should be some specific provision for some cash because it becomes an emergency at times. However, mining is equipment intensive, and for you that equipment are sometimes very necessary than even the cash. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And maybe to add a bit more, some of the equipment that individual miners consider sometimes for gold processing, at least, are gold concentrators. So centrifugal concentrators. We have shaking tables. I think in Indonesia and Asia, they're also considering froth flotation. But then the problem with this equipment is that if the miners do not have the right volumes, so all volume to be able to justify investment into this equipment, then they're making losses essentially. You have to be able to produce, more than a ton a day or more than 2 tons a day for you to justify an investment into a gold concentrator. And so these are some of the considerations. That's why for at least us, the Impact Facility, our initial focus is in providing production equipment like compressors, winches, to increase the production capacity at the mine site, before which miners can then consider investment into processing facilities that increase their gold recovery rates. And just to summarize the session, because we're at the top of the hour, we can see that a lot of miners are hesitant to commit to formal debt financing because of the inflexibility of the sector, right? Informal lenders understand the seasonality of the sector, just like the miners have said. They understand, that they can take payment in cash in gold rather than in cash. They are flexible around repayment terms, and in the absence of formal financing, informal finances will continue to thrive, right? And even as planetGOLD implementing countries are ongoing, it's imperative that part of your interventions are to increase the financial and business literacy of the miners. So as you introduce the financial products, the formal financial products, the miners they have increased capacity to be able to make the right applications or work with the financial institutions to support the right support in the application process for the miners, or else you're losing a lot more miners. And with regards, I can see that we have a question for the next workshop dates. We have scheduled the next workshop dates to occur in October and November. We have not specified a date. We might reach out to the individuals on the session to figure out the right timing for the next session. Please look out. I hope that this session was highly informative, and the next sessions would also be remote. We would have different guest speakers online. On that day, And we also will share the minutes, the summary of the session from today and the recording from this session with you in the next couple of days. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. If you have any questions to me or to any of the miners, please reach out and I would keep you in contact. And we look forward to seeing you next time. If you also have any recommendations on how we can improve this session and make the next sessions a bit more informative, we would highly appreciate any feedback. Thank you so much to the NRDC team and the interpreters for this session, and we look forward to connecting with you then. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening.